Merry Christmas, everybody. I hope that you've been well and you're staying warm with your loved ones. Christmas is my favorite time of year for various reasons. I get to see family, there's good food, I love giving gifts, and there's just something magical about the energy in the air. On top of that, I really enjoy revisiting Christmas movies or TV specials that I grew up with. This year though, at the suggestion of a community member, I decided to revisit episode 7 of the first season of the Boondocks, A Huey Freeman Christmas. I remember when this initially aired during my freshman year of high school and just enjoying the upfront, in-your-face, and frankly ridiculous humor. But upon rewatching it, I picked up on a bunch of nuance that I missed as a kid because my worldview was so narrow and my experiences were limited to the lens of a child. The Boondocks is stuffed to the brim with clever commentary, and watching this episode again after all this time kinda made me want to revisit the series as a whole for this channel, so if that's something you'd be interested in, let me know below. Or let me know if there are just specific episodes you want to see me talk about. Before we dive in, as always, a big shout out and endless love to these lovely people for the continued support on Patreon. In 2023, I'm considering doing theme postcards a few times a year, which was also another community suggestion. I'll have more time to work on content in 2023, so I'll be adding a Patreon tier that'll allow people to choose video topics outside of the regularly scheduled videos. So if any of that interests you and you'd like to see your name in every video, as well as see videos earlier than YouTube, consider heading on over to the Somewhere Past Never Patreon page. And if you're into it, why not join the community on Discord where you can keep track of what I'm considering working on, you can make suggestions if you have any, you can catch Pokemon, and just otherwise hang out with cool people. You should also come check me out on Twitch. 2023 is going to be a very big year for video games, and I'll be spending plenty of time over there in between working on content. It would mean a lot to catch a follow or sub from you guys, and I'd love to see you guys show up and chat. Last but certainly not least, I edited a Yu Yu Hakusho video for anime YouTuber Chuck that went live over on his channel last week. If you're craving some Yu Yu Hakusho content to tide you over until I cover the movie in January, you should go check his video out, show him some love, and let him know that I sent you. I worked pretty hard on it and I do think you guys would enjoy the video, so links to that and everything I mentioned will be in the description and pinned comment. Alright, enough with the plugging, let's continue talking about the Christmas special. So, right off the bat, it becomes clear that the story is split into 3 different opinions on the holiday itself. The vehicles for these opinions are Huey, Riley, and Jasmine. Jasmine is your quintessential Christmas is magical type child, even expressing a fundamental misunderstanding of the nature and purpose of the holiday.
Christmas is about how Santa died for our gifts and rose from the dead.
From the opening scene, we know that Jasmine is familiar with church and even the often performative and theatrical cadence of a lot of pastors. In her dream sequence, she's preaching to the congregation about Santa, who shares a similar level of deification in her mind as someone like Jesus. Which makes sense, because when you're a kid, much of the emphasis of Christmas is placed on Santa, while most adults, regardless of religious affiliation, recognize that in America, Jesus is kind of the backdrop of the holiday for a large swath of the population. Without an adult to explain and firmly distinguish the two, it's not surprising at all that Jasmine would essentially meld them together into a singular figure. Children just have weird brains like that. Directly contradicting Jasmine's adoration for Santa is Riley's ire toward him, which leads him to assaulting a mall Santa in the early minutes of the episode. Riley is in a very unique position during this episode because he believes Santa exists, but feels as though Santa overlooked both he and Huey when they lived in the hood. He even expresses that he didn't feel like he asked for very much, but still ended up with nothing. Which, while pretty awful in terms of what it represents, did still give us one of my favorite lines of the first season.
I didn't ask for much, just rims, not even a whole core.
Riley takes on the form of countless children that lived below the poverty line who, for reasons beyond their understanding or control, had to wake up on Christmas morning to find nothing waiting for them under the tree. He's the embodiment of those kids who got nothing but had to watch their friends play with their new toys Christmas morning, or listen to peers talk about what they got for Christmas when they returned to school. When the story we hammer into our children is that Santa comes when you're good but not when you're bad, and then the space under the tree is as bare as the night before, we force kids to wonder what they did wrong to deserve having Santa skip over them. Riley was in a position where it's clear he wondered why he and Huey were passed over when it was obvious others had not been. Were they not good enough for Santa? Why would they be left out? Christmas is supposed to be the most wonderful time of the year, especially for children, but Riley's own experiences had left him feeling the opposite. Riley doesn't quite have the tools to understand the reason for this reality, being the victim of capitalism in general, so the best conclusion he can come to that fits his understanding of the world is that Santa was purposely leaving him and Huey out. Then we come to Huey, who is apathetic to and disillusioned by the charade that is Christmas in general. Huey is far beyond Riley in terms of intellect and maturity, and would be considered quote-unquote woke by today's standards. He has a firm grasp of the origins of Christmas as a holiday and also rejects many of the standard beliefs a solid chunk of boomers and Gen Xers hold in regard to Jesus, namely his skin color and the December birth window. Even though it's not explicitly stated or even alluded to in this episode because the two spend most of their scenes apart, it's not far-fetched to believe that Huey is very much aware of the reasons he and Riley had to endure the Christmases they did. Like I mentioned, Huey's more intelligent than Riley and tends to see the bigger picture even if his own cynicism gets in the way at times. Despite how often they clash, Huey cares about his brother, and I highly doubt he'd want to be the one to saddle Riley with the truth of their situation. In a way, there's a sort of offbeat kindness to allowing Riley to maintain his hatred toward a fictional character, rather than tugging him into the reality Huey himself contends with. He could have easily interjected when Riley was going off on Jasmine or when he was writing a letter to Santa, but it would be less damaging to Riley to just let him believe what he does. Most of the episode follows Huey's plotline since he is technically the true main character of the series. Huey's teacher, Harold Uberwitz, makes his first appearance by trying to teach his predominantly white class about Kwanzaa and struggling through trying to pronounce certain words. He's kind of a stand-in for those teachers that try to be culturally sensitive but end up making things painfully awkward.
And on Kumba, the elder, okay, that would be me, leads everyone in the Harambe salute.
All right, my man Cornflake got the spirit. He's a little confused, but he got the spirit.
After failing to get the white students involved, he calls Huey out by name to attempt to help him perform a blood ritual to revive the fallen god Harambe.
Harambe! Harambe!
Eventually, though, Harold solicits Huey to direct the school's Christmas play. Huey expresses his disinterest in Christmas, but Harold tells him that he wouldn't be boxed into doing a traditional Christmas story. Huey tries to warn him that allowing him to do whatever he wanted would get Harold fired, which leads to this exchange.
You'll be fired.
Fired? For what?
For being an irresponsible white person.
However, Huey does end up agreeing and wants Harold's terms in writing, which is just a smart move in general. Remember kids, if someone promises you something in return for your labor, always get it in writing. Verbal agreements don't hold up in court. As we press on, Granddad, played by the late great John Witherspoon, is watching one of those traditional Christmas programs that you can always find playing, and we get to see Huey really express his feelings toward the holiday, which I think this one line pretty humorously summarizes.
Actually, Granddad, Christmas is a pagan holiday, and Jesus probably hates you for celebrating it.
Huey starts popping off about Christmas, but after a few sentences, his voice shifts to the same sound that Charlie Brown's teacher makes when speaking. It's a neat little nod to the Peanuts series. So when I was a kid, I thought this occurred because something was being purposely censored, since right before, Huey mentions Congress. 14-year-old Saturn was like,
Oh, this must be a reference to how there are things the government doesn't want us to know.
like some kind of conspiracy goblin. But watching the scene as an adult and Granddad's face, as well as what he says after, I realized that this audio change occurred because Granddad zoned out. He didn't hear a damn thing Huey said, because in his own words,
But it was boring, Huey. You just blah blah gay sex, blah blah Congress. You know, you gotta be interesting.
it brings to the forefront the idea that you can look someone dead in the face and give them undeniable truth, but none of it will sink in if you don't spark their interest and then keep their attention. It's part of why misinformation spreads like wildfire, because it's often way more interesting from a conversation standpoint. You're much more likely to get your point across if you can be entertaining, which is an unfortunate byproduct of the instant gratification the modern world has become so accustomed to, myself included. Anywho, this sparks Huey to spice up his script in order to best convey the points he wants to make. Unfortunately, this also begins leaning into the tunnel vision Huey ends up with in a single-minded pursuit of his theatrical vision. Having gotten Harold's terms in writing, he's given unparalleled control of the production, which spirals him into firing the entire student cast, enlisting the help of Quincy Jones, and even getting what looks like professionals together for the music. On one hand, it's a commentary about how giving too much power to one individual can quickly spiral into ballooning budgets, uncontained ambition, and even pissing off a few people. But on the other hand, it's also a commentary on how protective a director can be in regard to their work when given total creative control, something that happens on an exceedingly rare basis in Hollywood. Back with the converging Jasmine-Riley B-plot, Uncle Ruckus, no relation, takes on the job of being security for the mall Santa after Riley's first attack. It isn't long before Riley makes another move, dual-wielding airsoft pistols like he just finished playing Max Payne. Ruckus goes down and Santa uses the child on his lap as a meat shield, which I find pretty damn funny. A recurring line from Riley is that Santa is going to pay what he owes. Riley believes that he's owed either an explanation for his perceived wrongdoings, or retroactive gifts for the years he and Huey missed out on while living in the hood. I like that Riley's mindset is very childlike in the sense that he feels he can force Santa into coming up off those rims he wanted. It's also indicative of the way and area he grew up in, where disrespect is often met with a disproportionate level of aggression. Elsewhere, Huey explains that he's trying to change Christmas in elementary school theater forever and throws up the contract when Harold tries to ask a very important question about their budget. Huey uses the contract like both a shield to deflect bothersome queries and like a mace to strike down elements he doesn't care for. This demonstrates that while he does understand the binding power of a contract, he's still susceptible to the childish habit of refusing any sense of compromise. There's a brief montage of Huey working on his stage play, and honestly, this is what I look like working on scripts late at night. It's a pretty big mood. After being told the PTA is boycotting the play after Huey fired all of the students, because yeah, what group of parents is going to want to watch a school play that doesn't have any of their children in it, Huey is set upon by the principal, who gives him just a teeny tiny note to keep in mind for the play. It's nothing serious, nothing too large or crazy, it's just one little detail that I'm sure no one will notice.
Oh yeah, and Jesus can't be black.
This is one of the more salient bits of commentary and criticism the episode levies at American culture. Because of the structures our society is built upon, most white Americans, particularly from older generations, absolutely refused to even entertain the idea that Jesus was anything other than white. Doing so and conceding the point that Jesus was very likely brown or black would shake up the status quo in a way that shifts even a fraction of power toward brown and black communities. The episode itself even calls out the inconsistency in this refusal of one fact, but the acceptance of another prominent fact.
Jesus was Middle Eastern.
In addition to Arabs, the Middle East has always had many people of African descent, whom you would consider black.
Sorry, can't do it.
A second piece of commentary laced into the more overt one is the frequency in which corporate puppets swoop in to meddle with the projects of their directors, often leading to worse outcomes for the consumer. While this is the most prevalent in the film and gaming industry, it's also present in the music and writing industries. It's here that Huey also collides with the limitation of the power of his contract when the principal tears it to shreds. Make sure if you get it in writing that you make copies, kids. Naturally, after this forced amendment, Huey removes himself from the project and rejects what it was doomed to become. After all, the play was called The Adventures of Black Jesus, and with Huey being a stand-in for the militant Black Panther types, his blackness is important to him. So if you remove the Black Jesus, you've already ruined and missed the point of what he was attempting to do. Immediately following the scene, we come to the final bit of Jasmine and Riley's B-plot. After assaulting the last two Santas, the mall had no choice but to hire Ruckus to fill in. However, none of the kids, Jasmine included, recognize or accept him as Santa. Jasmine asks Riley why the real Santa won't show up, and he tells her that Santa isn't real. Now, I don't take this as Riley having some sort of revelation, so much as I take it as Riley using it to cope. Maybe if he convinces himself Santa isn't real, it'll make the fact he feels he was passed over hurt less. Because let's not pretend that's not what this comes down to. Riley's anger stems from a place of sadness, a place of being overlooked or feeling less than. If Santa's not real, then he wasn't overlooked. He wasn't undeserving, and most importantly, he's not inferior to the other kids that did get stuff for Christmas. He leaves Jasmine alone to cry, and surprisingly, it's Ruckus that lifts her spirits again by saying that Santa didn't come because he heard it wasn't safe that year, thanks to Riley's shenanigans. Huey's teacher Harold ends up going against the wishes of the principal and putting on the play without a single script change. It did get a standing ovation, but unfortunately very few people saw it because the PTA protest had picked up some steam. As Huey assumed, Harold was also fired shortly thereafter.
Mr. Uberwitz was fired for disobeying orders and for generally being an irresponsible white person.
The final moments of the episode are of Riley confronting Ruckus, having caught wind of the fact that he told Jasmine he was part of Santa's secret security. He tells Ruckus to pass along the message to Santa that he's going to pay what he owes next year, showing us that the previous scene was in fact Riley trying to convince himself Santa wasn't real, and not that he had had some grand epiphany.
Tell him Riley said I'll be waiting for his ass next Christmas. And that nigga better pay what he owes.
Snake, are you okay? Snake? Snake!
So yeah, that's a Huey Freeman Christmas. It's been at least 10 years since I've seen this episode, and it's kind of crazy to double back and realize just how much younger versions of me completely missed. I did leave a bit out just in case you wanted to watch the episode yourself, which you absolutely can do right here on YouTube. I wanted to leave out a few of the jokes to be discovered by you, and I also didn't want to make this video too long. This episode was an interesting watch in how it kind of recontextualizes Christmas in the sense that it reminds you, if you are a Christmas person, that not everyone may share the same fondness as you do, and that's okay. It's okay to completely buy into the Christmas magic, and it's okay to be disillusioned by it for any number of reasons. If you want a brief Christmas special that's not too preachy but is also quite funny, I definitely recommend you check this one out. A cup of hot chocolate or eggnog if you hate yourself like me, and a muffin is all you need to enjoy yourself. But that's all I got for you guys today. I'll be back in January with more Yu Yu Hakusho content, so be on the lookout for that. Also, be sure to check out the links below if you want to support the channel in some way. Remember to take care of yourselves and others. I hope your days remain or become Saturnian. Stay warm, have a Merry Christmas with your loved ones, and as always, thanks for watching.